annual budget period. The budget was prepared on a basis of accounting that is the same as the basis of accounting used during the preceding year. Is there anybody in the waiting room, Cindy, to give input? No.
Really?
Okay, so I'm going to wait a minute or so to see if, give them a time to get on if somebody's really trying to get on.
Hey, John, it might be a time to remind the board, as you'll recall, this budget was like before anything happened. So we're proposing that we adopt the budget before the world changed, and we have, we're nearing the end of some strategies to get the budget in line with what we expect might be the revenue. But this budget will not come back to the board to be reduced. It's going to be a matter of what won't we do to match the revenue coming in. And so everybody's on board with that, and we'll leave plenty of tracks on what we have in mind to do that. So again, there was some question earlier, shouldn't we make some adjustments? And I think Jose chimed in, same thing, that all of my colleagues are doing the same thing. They're just adopting the budget as though nothing happened, giving us the maximum flexibility if there is something that gets better in the interim. So just a reminder of that.
Okay, let that be the reminder. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for making this minute more interesting.
Well, you were stalling because, is there a flood of them coming yet, Cindy? Huh?
No.
I think we can close the hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So I will adjourn the budget hearing and call the regular school board meeting to order. At this time, though, before we get into the agenda, there is a surprise, Candy. That would be that members of this board would like to, members of this board and some of your administrative staff here would like to honor your and recognize your many years of service to D21. And we're putting you in the spotlight. Sorry. I'll start with myself. I first met Candy on her visit to Warm Springs Elementary School, where I was working as a teacher. School-wide, we were using a hands-on science curriculum called SKISS. As a curriculum specialist, she came to see that program being used in action. And upon meeting her, I was impressed with her child-centric focus, that she took the time to closely look at how effective this new science program was to generate interest and involvement with the students. As a board member of our district now, years later, I reflect on the fact that it has been to D21's advantage to have Candy as the one and only superintendent for 16 years, and that she has remained first and foremost committed to the students that the district serves. In my time on this board over the last 7 years, I have found Candy to have some very good qualities. She's a great listener. She's able to reflect back to you what you've said and expand on it in a conversation. She easily employs new ideas that she finds attractive and are based in fact and science with proven results. She also relies on the wisdom that she's gained that only many years of experience can provide. In conversations with other superintendents in the state that I would meet at conferences, I would hear about their great admiration and respect for Candy's work and Candy as a basic, her work as superintendent for our district. The community has been fortunate to have Candy as a leader. From D21's inception, she has led us through some tough, traumatic times, 2 recessions, and now a pandemic, and provided all the while a stable, steady hand at the helm of D21. I'm presently reading My Own Words by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a Supreme Court justice who is known for her commitment to women's issues. In her book, she writes a chapter about the wife of President William Howard Taft. Her name, Helen Herron Taft, was known as Nellie. As First Lady, she was most famous for the planting of 3,020 Japanese cherry trees planted on the Capitol grounds and is still enjoyed every spring today. She's also the First Lady to support women's suffrage and had brains. She had brains and she used them. And her credo was, "We live to learn." When I read that, I thought, and I was thinking all the while what I was going to say about Candy. And that is what stood out in my mind as Candy's best quality. She lives to learn. And that's the quality, that of valuing learning first and foremost, which has benefited this school district the most. If you visit any of our schools, you can see that value reflected every day in the classrooms by the teachers, carried out by all of the staff. So now she's made a decision to retire. And I know she looks forward to future years of moving in new directions. So Candy, enjoy fully the life you're about to lead. You deserve every bit of a good life. Thank you for serving D21 for 16 years, the one and only superintendent we've ever had. Thank you. Randy, I know you have words to speak.
Well, I do, because turnabout's fair play. So Candy, in anticipation of your retirement, we did a brief survey, and I'm happy to report that you were selected as the most beloved and respected superintendent in the entire history of North Wasco County School District. In fact, no one else received even a single vote. This may be due to the fact that you are the only superintendent in the history of North Wasco County School District. A little bio, John didn't get into it too deep. You've worked in K-12 education for the past 44 years, beginning your career as an elementary teacher at St. Mary's Academy in the Dalles. You then taught at Parkdale Elementary School in the Hood River School District before returning to St. Mary's. After 13 years in elementary instruction, you moved into administration, spending 5 years at the Education Service District, managing grants and providing consulting services in the area of curriculum instruction and assessment. For the past 26 years, you have worked as a district administrator in a variety of capacities. Superintendent/principal at Wamak, a junior high principal in Tillamook, assistant superintendent in the Dalles School District 12, and a superintendent in North Wasco since the formation of the district. When District 21 began operations in July of 2004, you were tasked with some unique challenges that most superintendents never get to deal with, such as developing and presenting all of the necessary policies to be adopted by the school board, reconciling and combining 4 existing labor contracts into 2 new ones, hiring all of the staff for the entire school district, and establishing your new cabinet team. You have long been a champion of public education at both the local and state levels. Part of that commitment is your tireless effort representing the district's interests on many local committees, such as the P3 Collaborative, the Wasco County Crisis Response Team, the Community Outreach Team, Blue Zones, many others. At the state level, you have been active in committee work within the Coalition of Oregon School Administrators for a number of years, having served many roles in the Oregon Association of School Executives. Duties have included active membership on various work groups, the Vision and Policy Committee, the Education Leadership Coalition, and you are currently serving as president of the Executive Committee. You have made countless trips to Salem to testify and lobby for adequate and stable funding for K-12 education. Working closely with the Oregon School Boards Association and the Coalition of School Administrators to develop messages to present to the legislators, emphasizing the importance of this funding. During one extended period of less than adequate funding, you assumed the role of Human Resources Director in the district for a number of years. This was in addition to your ongoing work as superintendent. You have always performed your duties with honesty and integrity, and your mantra of what did you know, when did you know it, and what are you going to do about it, has been a guiding principle for all of us. There have been some disappointments along the way, perhaps the biggest being the inability to pass a much needed bond levy. Some temporary frustration, but ultimate satisfaction as we negotiated 15 plus collective and bargaining and charter agreements. There have also been many successes, large and small, during your tenure. The retirement of the middle school bonds, maintaining elementary music and PE even during the worst funding times, maintaining and expanding career and technical education programs at the high school, planning the launch of a dual language immersion program next fall, and accomplishing small improvements in all of the district buildings, including new floor covering at the district office, which unfortunately required you to sacrifice your favorite old carpet. Your wisdom, experience, vision, and leadership will surely be missed in the district. And finally, my friend, congratulations on a job very well done, and sincere best wishes for a retirement very well earned.
So I invite any of the other board members to add their well wishes and comments. Dawn.
Wow, Candy, I don't know how you did it. This is a lot. And, you know, I know Teresa's finding out very quickly, but, you know, this is not an easy job, and it's a high pressure job. It's a highly visible job, and you're constantly under the microscope, and it's a fine balance of trying to make sure that you're doing the right thing and balancing the students' needs and the district's needs and your personnel's needs. And it's just an amazing feat of balance. So you've done a good job, and we are grateful that you've been here. And I am so excited that you can go relax and enjoy, and maybe turn off that alarm clock in the morning. I don't know if you're a morning person or not, but you know, it's you made it to the finish line, and congratulations. And we're very grateful for everything you've done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other board members? Michael.
I just want to say, only been on the board for a little over a year. And in that time, the one thing that I have realized more than anything is everything you do is about the kids. Coming from Hood River, where music was cut, PE was cut, teachers had to teach. Like I remember at Parkdale, for instance, the first, second, and third grade teachers, they took turns on different days trying to still teach art or something. But the Dalles kept all of that. Wasco County kept that. And that was because of the sacrifices that not only you made, but other people at the district office made by doing 4 jobs instead of 1. And in my short time, I appreciate that about you tremendously. So thank you.
Any other board members? Soleil.
Well, I think congratulations. It's amazing. And I wish you all the best, wonderful, peaceful retirement. I've only been able to work with you for 10 months. So I think I just wish I had the opportunity to work with you more, but it's so wonderful what you've been able to accomplish in all these years. And we all owe you some big gratitude. So thank you very much, Candy.
Jose.
I guess I'd echo a lot of what everyone said. Having worked with you over the past year has been an awesome learning experience, just to try and absorb as much of the knowledge that you have from a local and state level has been amazing. A couple of things that kind of stood out early on, you shared a couple stories about some of the challenges that you faced throughout your career, you know, as a woman in a leadership position. You know, how that wasn't always the case. You know, it was a male dominated position. And, you know, hearing that from you just showed me the type of individual and leader that you are. And, you know, I think we're fortunate to have had you guide us in this early part of D21. And we can't thank you enough for everything that you have done. And, you know, I will probably still reach out to you to learn and absorb from you still. because you are a wealth of knowledge when it comes to a lot of our state issues that we have at hand. So thank you for everything you've done, Candy.
Any other board members? David?
Pretty much like everyone else said, done you about a year. I talked to you right after starting and told you that I didn't know what to expect because what people say and what you are two totally different things. If people would take the time to sit down and talk with you, it would be a whole different community. I mean, you've taught us so much, and you don't have to take the time to go find the answer because it's up here and it's amazing. I've learned a lot. I've enjoyed this. It just makes us want to do more. And I really appreciate the time we've had. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would echo what the other board members have said. I've had 2 years of working with you. I didn't know what to expect when I came into it, but you've vastly exceeded my expectations. You are like a center of calm in a stormy sea. You always maintain the utmost integrity in your words, in your demeanor, in your actions. And the strides that this district have made over the last 10 years and 5 years, I just think speak volumes for your tenacity and your forward thinking and your vision and your care for all children. I mean, it's really, truly amazing what our district has been able to accomplish in terms of closing the achievement gap and getting graduation rates up. So thank you so much, Candy, for your tenacity and for sticking with us for so long. We're going to really miss you.
Well, thank you all. I'm as most people know, I'm a rather private person, and I do really well under lots of stress, as most people know, and I can handle under pressure. Compliments I'm not so good at, but thank you all. Really appreciate your kind words, and just want to say that I'm feeling really good about moving on. This is an amazing board right now. We have, and I've had the good fortune of having really good board members over the years. So I just want to give a shout out to all of those. It's a thankless job, and there have been so many of them that have gone through so much with this district. It's never easy. I was told when I started this, if you get into the position, don't count on being there more than a year, and then be ready to move on, because nobody survives a consolidation, a merger. It's tough. And so, but this is my community, and I care very deeply about the kids that are here, and have had the awesome pleasure of being able to hand diplomas to so many kids over the years, and of course to my 4 grandchildren during the course of that time, and then watch some of our kids come back and join us here in the district, and they're always going to be my kids, right? Even though most of the time a kid in the elementary school isn't even going to know who the superintendent is, but I know who they are, and I've been there quietly in the background. I don't like to announce that I'm going anywhere, but go to the ball games and all that, and I will continue to do that. I'm going to cheer you guys on from the sidelines. We have a fantastic staff. Thank you for trusting me when we got into the depth of this, and I know, John, I had a really heart-to-heart conversation with you. I said, please don't go back out right now, not in this climate. We need somebody that knows us and can lead us, that's from within, and you had some really good choices, and you've got Teresa, and I am so impressed. She is going to do an amazing job. I feel so good. It's real easy for me to now step out. And I'm there, you know, a phone call away if you've got a question about history or whatever, but I'm not the kind of person that needs to be in the middle of anything. I'm going to be there cheering you guys on, and very happy to be doing that. So thank you all again for your kind words. Thank you, Randy. It's been quite a ride, and I can't tell you how many times I've gone into his office. In fact, I've done it again recently. And after everything's settled, I'll say, however, there's this one really important piece, and can we figure out how to do it? And we always joke that my fingers never leave my hands. I always manage to come up with something that it's good. If it's good for kids, I'm going to be there, and I'm going to try to figure out a way to get it done. So, but thank you all. It's been a great ride.
By recently, she means this morning.
John, you're muted if you're trying to address the group.
There we go. Sorry. So what I was trying to say is, if we were all together, I would just give you a big hug. But since we're not, I have to give you a virtual hug. That's what that motion was all about. So thank you. Thank you for your service. Okay, so we'll move on. Which board member would like to read the district mission and vision statement this time? We'll all step up at the same time. Okay. Oh, thank you, Michael.
Okay. Mission statement: graduating all students to be college and career ready, challenging, inspiring, and empowering them to be healthy and productive citizens. The vision statement: North Wasco is a premier school district. We provide students a rigorous and relevant education, with schools performing academically in the top 5% of the nation. Our students are inspired by a talented, innovative, and highly effective staff that values continuous professional growth. Our district graduates citizens who are ethical and motivated to achieve their limitless potential. North Wasco is fully embraced by the community, reflecting its health and well-being.
Thank you very much, Michael. Next on the agenda is public comments submitted. Have there been any comments submitted? No. Okay. The next thing on the agenda is the consent agenda. There are 3 items: approving the work session meeting from July 9th, and approval of the meeting minutes from May 28th, and a personnel report. So the consent agenda consists of these items, and they're routine items for which board members need no further information on prior to voting. The consent agenda should be voted on under one motion rather than separate votes. If a board member so requests, boards may allow a consent agenda item to be removed from the consent agenda and discussed separately. So at this time, I would be up for a motion to approve the consent agenda. If there's no corrections or additions. If there are, indicate that you have a concern.
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
to approve
go
the
ahead, Rebecca.
as presented.
It's been moved. Is there a second? And seconded by Dave to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, that's all of us, unanimous. The motion is approved. Old business. Is there anything in particular in that realm topic? Oh, okay. New business. I know there's stuff here. So first on our new business is a superintendent's report. Candy?
Okay, and Cindy, if you'll bring up your Pinterest-like draft copy of the summer field use policy. We could share that on the screen. Well, she's, I hope she's, oh, there it is. Okay, she's getting there. So we have been moving forward with planning for summer field use and trying to make sure that we cover all the bases that are there. And I can't thank enough the committee that's worked on that. Dave, thank you for being a part of that committee. Your insight in working with all the different teams and coming from that community perspective has been really important. Don Carter, of course, because you're so impacted, by whatever goes on our properties. You've been a big part of it, and of course Matt Morgan with the athletic director, and then Cindy, and then Claire Rainett from the ESD, who works not only with us on a number of projects, for example, the pandemic plan and different things like that, but also is connected with the unified command in terms of being able to kind of be our liaison on some of the things that are going on. And all the others who have been an integral part of having a voice as we try to move forward with this. First of all, I want the audience to know that school districts are under a different guidance than just the counties. We have to do what the state, Oregon Department of Education guidelines give us. And of course, currently we're under an executive order that's very specific. And the other piece that we have to think about is insurance. And we also have to think about the county. So whatever's going on, and especially in this COVID-19 environment, our local health authority, as well as the state and federal health authorities, have a lot to say about what we're going to be able to do. In particular, I wanted to point out that this morning I was on with our insurance company through Oregon School Boards Association on a online Zoom meeting, and really it was very valuable to find out that the world has changed so dramatically that every single contract, or in some cases we don't even have a contract, or we're going to have a contract with everybody that interfaces with our facilities at all, including our fields and our buildings. So the good news is that the PACE attorneys will look at each and every one of those contracts and make sure that they give us advice on what needs to be there in terms of liability that we, and risk that we will need to decide whether we're going to take as we try to share our fields. So there were some clear things that we were told by PACE that if it's not in the guidelines that were issued by the state last week, we can't do it. So for example, it's unfortunate, but right now, when we start to move towards premise use, we're not going to be able to have our we've had a church that is actually used one of our facilities, and that's a piece that is not in the guidance, and until that changes, we wouldn't be able to do a premise use that way. For anyone else who comes on our property, and especially in the terms of the fields, we're going to have to be very, very careful about how that happens, because ultimately, even though we can have some waivers signed, ultimately the school district is going to be taking on risk as we move forward. So it was just interesting. Even our Mid-Columbia Medical Center, the wonderful trainers that we've had the opportunity to have with us, we have to have a formalized agreement that we send to the attorneys to take a look at. So it's we can't rush into this. We have to make sure that these things are done right. So I'm glad we've got a little bit of a time before the July 1st, and we're hoping to get things finalized and move along with it. So as you look at the first page here, Teresa is going to be sending out summer field use and policy. And Cindy, if you can move it on, just give us a little bit of, the next one is the background to where we are, and within that is embedded the guidance that we're under, and all of, anyone can go online and take a look at all of the details that are there. And there's been a tremendous amount of work that's gone on at the state level to come up with these guidelines. Of course, not only for field use, but for actually the blueprint we're going to be talking about a little bit later to try to get us back into school in the fall as well. So these, and OSAA, can't say enough for Peter Weber, who has done an outstanding job of really pulling together. Everybody knows how important it is for our kids to be able to participate and be active, and he's done an outstanding job of pulling together information for us and sharing it, which is embedded in this document. And so you've got OSAA guidelines, you've got the field use request process that our group has worked on. I talked earlier about the whole liability insurance piece on our side, and of course we're going to have others that come onto our premises have liability coverage as well. And it talks about staffing. It talks about screening and exposure. We have to be able to sign in and trace whoever's been on the property for whatever activity is going on. It talks about cloth face coverings and when that's appropriate, participation and attendance logs and how critical those are, high risk populations, water, equipment. And then as it moves on, and this is an ongoing document, and the first piece of this that came out from OSAA, they had put all the work into phase 1, and just recently this is where they are with phase 2, which is what our county is in. So we do have some phase 2 guidance from OSAA right now that we're also able to take a look at. So just scrolling on through there's a lot of links in this document. And then at the very end, what you'll see as our premise use agreements obviously have to shift to reflect where we are. And there's also going to be a COVID-19 waiver that has to be signed, and the COVID-19 information liability release piece that needs to be there. So and then at the very end, it gives you a sample of a COVID participant and attendance log form. So it's been a tremendous amount of work. I really appreciate all of those that have put in effort so far, and we're going to do our best to be able to, and as North Wasco, be able to have field use this summer yet. So David, if you or Dawn would like to chime in a little bit on this, since you're both have both been involved in this would be a good time to do that. If you want to talk to the audience a little bit about where we are in the process, because I know our community wants to know, when can we get out there on those fields?
Is Dawn in here?
I think Dawn was going to be here. Cindy, do you know if Dawn's here? He was going to be here, so I'm not sure whether he is.
I just let him in, but he's in now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Dawn, do you want to?
Dawn, we were talking today, and he's got some better dates because we have to get the we have to have the porta potties and everything out, and so he's working on that to get that done, so he can speak better on time frame.
Okay, so Don, are you on? Can you come in?
Yes, yes, I'm here. I'm sorry I couldn't get
So what
everything.
so he was mentioning that, David was mentioning that you two talked today about the additional porta potty. I mean, we're talking about things that are having to be done as we try to get ready to be able to allow people to sign up and be able to use our fields.
Yeah, that was one of the first thing, and because we have to keep our facilities, the indoor facilities closed, such as dugouts, locker rooms, bathrooms, etc. That's part of the guidance. So in order to do that, we have to secure porta potties and hand washing stations for each of the facilities at Thompson Track, Dry Hollow Playground, et cetera, et cetera. Those are starting July 1st. I have those set up.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if my screen is frozen or not.
No, you're not frozen.
Oh,
Not
okay.
now.
All right. Okay. All right. Sorry.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you. You're not frozen, and we're going to move on to the next piece that I have here. And so that's where we are with summer field use. Just want the community to know that we're working hard to try to get this lined out so that people can come in and feel good about what we are able to offer. But we're fortunate to have, our folks that are here in the county are extremely helpful. The ESD is coming alongside of us again with Claire Rain. It's time to help us get some things put together. And then, of course, got a really good, fine committee that's trying to get this tied down so we can open up a little bit more.
Jose has a comment to make.
Okay.
It's more just kind of, I guess, a clarification. And I think it's important for our community to know if I understand correctly, but I think the importance of the guidelines is that the reality is if we are found not in compliance, my understanding is that they could withhold funding from us from a state level. And so I think that's the importance of, as a community, we understand kiddos and parents want to start using our fields and facilities, but we unfortunately have to kind of do this as a result of, the state being able to withhold funding. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's been correct. And the other piece that is no matter what we do moving forward, we're going to as a district incur some sort of risk, and we're going to have to weigh out how much risk we're willing to take, because there's no insurance out there that's going anywhere that's going to cover a COVID event. And so if you don't do things and follow all of the protocols the way that you're supposed to, it opens up the district for liability. And we know we don't have a bank account someplace to be dealing with that sort of thing. It's going to be tough enough having enough resources to provide education for the kiddos this next year. So that's, it's a balancing act, and it's all about, we can't be totally averse to risk because everything's going to have some level of risk. It's how much are we in our community willing to take on so that we can keep moving forward and get things going on for kids. Thank you. The other piece that I want to update you on is the reopening in the fall, because I know everybody is really wanting to know, what is it going to look like in the fall? What is it going to look like? And again, here locally, we've got a great crew working on many, many aspects of that. And in fact, I'm just looking at, we have a draft from Claire Rainett again is helping us with this piece. We have a draft operational blueprint reentry timeline that's coming up. And this week I've had, and Teresa's been on 2 meetings, superintendents and central office kinds of folks have been on state level meetings, what we refer to as off the record / Oregon Department of Education / Oregon School Boards Association in there trying to figure out the guidance that has been put out and the and the operational blueprint that we are required to develop in order to open in the fall. And there is a huge task ahead for our district, for our administrators, for our staff to complete this blueprint, because it has to be on our website no later than the 15th of August in order for us to open the doors and welcome students. The operational blueprint requires that we take input from our families, students, community, our local health authorities, community members, from our staff, and there's a lot of work. So we've got surveys. We've surveyed the staff. We already have a group that is meeting in terms of our staff for the realization that we're not going to have the resources we had hoped we would have, and things are going to have to be done differently. So we're going to have to, that impacts our collective bargaining agreements. And so we have to have our staff with us, understanding that every step of the way, so that you come to some methods of understanding that will need to be put in place in order for us to open up. So that's one section. You've got the collective bargaining agreement piece to deal with. You also then, on the other part, want a lot of staff and input on putting the blueprint together. So the state is helping us. There's a series of workshops that are going on. Most recently, again, I've been involved with the superintendent and central office leaders, and we've had the first one was on June 16th, and then one again today. And they go over we've gone over the different sections of the guidance. Series 2 overview starts tomorrow, and that's for principals. And again, of course, superintendents can go in with that. And so principals either have to be on that in that series tomorrow, or they have to be it's repeated again on Monday. But and the time frame on these is 1 to 4 o'clock. So it's a good chunk of time. It's fast paced, and there's a lot to cover that the state's going through with us. So series 3 then, on the operational, that brings then together the principals and other leadership. So there's going to be an elementary one on Tuesday, June 23rd from noon or 1 o'clock to 4, and then the middle school, June 24th. And again, that same sort of time frame. There's one from 9 to noon and one from 1 to 4. You can be in one or the other session. And then the high schools will be on Thursday, June 25th from 9 to noon or 1 to 4. And then the 4th series is going to be ongoing, and that's for the principals and leadership. And that's going to be hosted by then you cut off into regions, and that'll be hosted by our local ESDs. And I can't thank enough Pat Sublette and the crew at our ESD. We are so fortunate. She's right at the front lines helping us, and the staff are so helpful and willing to help us make sure that we meet these deadlines. Now, once we get this blueprint put together, and that includes instruction, it includes family and community engagement, it includes staffing and personnel, it includes mental, social, emotional health, it includes public health protocols, it includes all these things that I talked about in terms of field use and facilities, but beyond that, facilities and school operations in total, whether it's nutrition services or it's how you clean a building. And then, of course, response to outbreaks. So all of those elements have to be in this blueprint. And each school within our district has to have a plan. And that plan has to feed into the district plan. So what we're going to do is parse out the things that are going to be particular to a building for the buildings to work on. And then things like nutrition services and overall operations, that will feed into their school plans what has to be a district-wide approach. So we'll be doing both of those things over the course of the summer. We have to submit the plan to our local Health Authority, they do not have to approve it, but we do have to submit it. We will submit and present it to the board. Again, you do not need to approve it, but it does have to be submitted to you. And then we have to submit it to the Oregon Department of Education. And again, it has to be on our website and easily accessible to anyone who wants to look at it. And then the Oregon Department of Education will be publishing all of them from across the state on their website, so that anybody can go in and see any district's blueprint and drill down into school by school what it looks like. So it's a huge task ahead of our staff this summer, but I know that they're up to it, because I've already, listened to people say that they're ready to take it on. They know this summer's going to be unusual. They're not going to have the usual kinds of breaks that they have had in the past, and that this has got to come first so that we can get our kids back to school. So anyway, with that, are there any questions on that particular piece? Because that's huge.
Can I just say one thing? First of all, whatever support you need from the board in the planning of this, please don't hesitate to ask us. I know that expecting your paid staff to do all this work over the summer might be a bit much. So, we're willing to pitch in however you need. And then secondly, after reading the guidance, this is just my one thing I'm ever going to say about this, because I have utmost respect in your guys' ability to plan for this. But as much as possible, after hearing the data last week about the high percentage of children that are not engaged with distance learning, as much as humanly possible, I'd really like to advocate for as much on-site education as possible. So that's all I'll say.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I'm totally in agreement with you. There's been nothing sadder than seeing, not only here locally, but across the state. I was looking at, for example, on the news and seeing the piece that they've done on Woodlawn in Portland, and watching how sad those little kids are that they can't be with their teachers. It just breaks your heart. It's not right. And we're going to do everything we can to have as much on-site as possible, trust me, but it's a challenge, and we want to make sure that our parents feel safe. We've got to enlist our community, because I'm really concerned that the model we do is going to be some sort of hybrid, because you can't have as many kids in the building as we've had before. And I'm really worried about childcare. I'm worried about what parents do when they need to go back to work. And I think our community needs to help us with this. We've got to think this through. There is a lot of local input that needs to happen in order for us to pull this off, and to support our kids out there and not have that gap continue to widen the dramatic way we've already seen it widen is already sad enough. So I'm with you, and I know that our staff is with you on that. So thank you. And the last piece for mine, and then when I finish speaking, I'm going to invite Teresa to go ahead and talk as well. The other piece that we're really looking at is equity. And of course that ties right into what we just talked about. We've got so many of our children either in poverty or there's so many things that make it tougher for kids to be able to do well in school, and we want to get rid of as many barriers as possible. And one of the things we put in the Student Investment Act plan is for us to do an equity audit, and there was a tool. The Department of Education provided us with a tool. They've got a lot of good information and resources in terms of equity work, and we had used that as part of it. But going forward, we need to do more. And once again, I'm gonna tout, we're very fortunate to have Pat Sublette as our ESD superintendent, because back in January, before any of this happened, she had called me and she said, and she works a lot with Ford Family Foundation, and she comes out of Douglas County, and she said, Candy, would you be interested if we could get, and it's called the Institute for Research and Reform in Education. And what had happened down in Douglas County is Ford Family Foundation had paid for them this national research piece to come in and work with Douglas County. So it's a nationally recognized group that works with districts of all sizes to utilize their data, review it, and determine next steps for the district, measure the outcomes, also using data that is already available whenever possible. And their services will be available to District 21 at no cost, thanks to Ford Family Foundation. They work with the district to assist in using the data to advance outcomes for every student. And they also use surveys of teachers and students. They support superintendents over time to help the district use data effectively in ways that are actionable. And she has personally seen that work in Douglas County, and they this group takes the time to establish the relationships, get to know the people, the community. And this is one piece of how, when we've got another contract that's already in place that we're going to use to move forward this equity audit this next year. So Teresa is going to have some really good resources without additional cost to the district on some very, very important work that needs to be done. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Teresa to speak as well.
Thank you, Candy. I'm very excited about the opportunity that we have as a district to capitalize on that support through that equity audit. When I look at the operational blueprint, the piece that overlays all of it, all of the instruction and family community engagement, staffing personnel, mental, social, and emotional health, what overlays all of that is the equity piece, because it's so important. So when you look at public education, it plays such a key role in a healthy society, and with that equity piece, with it being, opportunities for every child to have the chance for success in education. I think that the work as we move forward as a district, the equity audit, educating ourselves, listening to our students, listening to our community, with that equity lens in mind, and then examining our data, digging down and examining our systems that we have in place as a district, looking at, actually taking a hard look at our own attitudes as educators, and our perspectives as well, but really listening and looking at our data to educate ourselves, so that we can do a better job for our students, number one, our students, as well as our community. So I think it's important work that we're embarking on, and part of that is looking at the policies that we have as a board, those equity policies that we have in place, so that we can make sure that we are providing opportunities for all of our students to be happy, healthy, and successful within our community. So thank you.
Thank you. Any more on your report, Candy, for your section?
I'll turn it back over to you, John. I
Okay.
appreciate that.
All right, thank you. So I just want the board to keep some things in mind. For one, I echo Teresa Peters, what she just said. Those were all the thoughts I had, so I don't have to repeat them. She did a very good job. Thank you, Teresa. But one thing I would like to have happen at the board level is that we set an example for the rest of the staff in the district to receive some training as a board, equity, diversity and inclusion models, so that we kind of understand who we are as people in relationship to that. And we will have more together in our minds for doing what is in the board's wheelhouse to do, which is create policy to make movement in the district, which is the way we want people to behave and to move forward in our district. So I think that's the important thing. One, our own reflection on these issues as a board, and have training starting this summer. Perhaps ESD could help us with that. And then that will prepare us to write much more knowledge. We'll have so much more knowledge to write good policy. And I think that's where we ought to go. That's where we ought to stay, is creating policy to make changes and to create action. That's what the community will understand. That's the bottom line. And I know Jose has a lot to add to that, so I'm going to let Jose speak next.
Thanks, John. I want to echo some of the same things. I think right now, we see it in the news every day. We're in the middle of a pandemic. There's a strong Black Lives Matter movement. Many of us woke up today to the news that the Supreme Court did a ruling on DACA. Just earlier in the week, Supreme Court did another ruling on LGBTQ rights, for the workplace. And all of these things to me speak on this topic of equity, right? So I think it's first and foremost on everyone's mind. The one thing I just want to remind ourselves is that it's easy to get wrapped up into these different topics. But the one thing I think I would want to remind myself and the group as a board is that one of the questions that we need to ask ourselves off the top is, how does this impact our kids? They should be kind of first and foremost in any of our thinking is, how does this impact our kids, and what can we do to improve their environment here at D21? The other thing to keep in mind too is that a lot of this work, as you start reading it, it's really a journey, and everyone starts at a different starting point. And I think we need to be respectful of that. This can be a huge growth opportunity for a lot of people just to learn not only about yourself, but of others and how to kind of work together. The other thing with this is it seems like in today's society, as quickly as information is routed, a lot of people look for like a singular act or a singular solution that is a quick hit, and you can pat yourself on the back and yay, we're done, or we did something, right? But I think to truly do it justice, it actually needs to be a series of action, and we need to have a kind of growth mindset attached to it, similar to like our continuous improvement plans and whatnot that we do at the district level. A starting point, I think, again, this is a journey, not a singular act by any means, is to really start kind of at square one. And to me, that is having a thoughtful and open conversation with students, parents, or community, and just really hearing from them. As I thought about this, I'll share with you guys a quote. Many of you guys are familiar with Brene Brown and a lot of the work she does, but a quote that I found that kind of resonated with me as we talk about this topic. She says, "In order to empathize with someone's experience, you must be willing to believe them as they see it and not how you imagine their experience to be." So to me, unless we are hearing what their experience is, we're not really going to be able to resolve what they may be experiencing. And recently, actually just this week, I learned of a couple of things, and these are just examples, no finger pointing, no anything, but I think it's important for us to be aware. I think I've used this saying a couple of times in terms of we don't know what we don't know, right? But what I did learn recently is at Chenoweth, I'll use as an example. We did the scholarship event, which is awesome for our graduating seniors. But one thing that was pointed out to me is that out of our 3 elementaries, Chenoweth doesn't provide a scholarship for a graduating senior because they lack a PTO at the school, right? So that's one out of our 3 elementaries that is unable to do that. And so I think that is part of, you know, what are the experiences out there similar to this example? And, you know, are there simple solutions that we can fill those as a community? And as John said, policy is probably the biggest portion of our work, right? And as a lot of these topics came up, probably as much as everyone else, you know, I started to kind of look at different things, learn, read, watch videos, whatnot. And one of the things I did is I started looking at different districts, again, trying to learn about the journey and where different districts are at in their policy work. And one thing that stood out to me, where other districts, I would say, are further along in the journey than we are at D21, is a specific policy. And it's actually attached in our board pack, and it's policy JBB, and it's an educational equity policy, which is something that we don't have. And I think that given just kind of everything at the moment, this is a good opportunity for us to start that dialogue, have a conversation with staff, our community, centered around, you know, what does a equity in our district look like, and really add this policy at the end of the day to D21 for the improvement of our educational experience of our kiddos. And so with that, I also want to kind of put in all of our minds, you know, Teresa and the other staff have the unenviable task to do a lot of the heavy lifting for getting ready for the fall. But I also want to be cognizant that we as a board need to start thinking about what goals do we have as a board for next year? What goals do we, you know, have as individuals that might kind of lend themselves to the work of the board? So I think we have a tremendous opportunity, a good conversation that we can have with our community and how to make things better for our kiddos. So those were kind of my thoughts on equity and education that I had.
So I would, at this point, invite other board members to chime in and give us all, share our ideas, our hopes, our dreams. Done.
Okay, you know, I think that this is going to be an important discussion as the board is encountering the issue of the day, and we, you know, there's greater consciousness about racism, and I think that this is a pivotal moment in our society. I think it's incumbent upon the board to start obviously doing the important work, including policy work here too, but I also think it's important for us to start looking at, you know, things like building names and things like that that are tied into people that have very bad histories of oppressing people and obviously very, very clearly racist. And it's going to be a difficult community dialogue. I realize that. But at the same time, my biggest concern is what kind of messages are we sending to the students by ignoring that glaring piece there. I just have some issues with that. And early on, when I first started as a board member, I went down to the school district museum and I was walking down the hall and they had a description of Amaton Field. And when you start looking at museum, if something is going to be an interpretive display, the content that is interpreting it should be neutral because it's describing historical event and not using pejorative terms. And I was extremely offended that instead of an article, it was actually the label, the interpretive label referred to Native Americans as the red man. And it was on the wall there, and that was absolutely unacceptable. I brought it to the attention of Candy. I haven't had a chance to follow up to see if that was rectified. But, you know, students are passing that every day. And I know that we do have Native populations here in the Dalles. So we have to set the example. We have to do the hard work. We have to, you know, continuously learn, because we're the ones who are creating that educational gateway and openings for students. So that's where equity begins. And so we have to stumble through our own roadblocks and learn from them and be open-minded about it. But I think that really, you know, something that we need to address. And just my last statement too is I do want to express extreme concern that there was a former board chair of the school district board who made a very racist comment in a public Facebook forum. And I was very concerned that we as a board should probably make a statement to separate ourselves from that, because we're a different group. And I believe that we have different ideals in that individual. So I also wanted to see some kind of action there. So thank you for listening.
Other board members?
I just wondered if I could share part of a letter that the Oregon School Board School Board member of Color Caucus put out on June 6th. I'm just going to read it verbatim, but I feel like it captures sort of what I'm feeling right now. So they wrote, as school board members and community leaders, it is our responsibility to advocate for all children in our school system. That work cannot be done without direct, intentional focus on our Black students who, from early learning through post-secondary education, experience disparities in educational outcomes, disciplinary sanctions, biased curriculum that focus on the white dominant narrative, and omissions of culturally specific strategies. We must hold ourselves and our schools accountable and demand zero tolerance policies for racist behavior in and on our campus grounds and school-sponsored events. And I would also add, this is separate from this letter, this is also true for our Native American communities, our immigrant communities, and other communities of color. So I know that John and Jose have both mentioned policy is one tool that we have in our toolbox for a board. But I would like us to kind of have a deeper discussion than just that. I'd like us to all look internally and maybe do some anti-racism work as a board, perhaps at our retreat. And I'd also like us to think about our board goals and also our superintendent goals. And then eventually our recruitment of a permanent superintendent, making anti-racism more at the core of what we're talking about, not just equity. Equity is sort of like everyone gets the same treatment. Anti-racism actually goes a little bit further than that and starts to peel apart the layers of overt and covert racism that might be built into our system. So I'd like us to look a little bit more systematically or very much systematically at our entire system that we have in our district. So that's all I have to say, but thank you for bringing up this discussion.
Others?
I just want to say I would echo everything that's been said, so I don't need to repeat all that. This is a turning point, I feel, for people to stand up and protect the vulnerable and uplift the disenfranchised. And Black Lives Matter, Indigenous Lives Matter. It is completely our responsibility to do our part to ensure that we are providing as best we can equal opportunities for everybody. And it's a very emotional time. Tensions are really, really high. And I guess the one thing I would add to what's been said is I would like to find a way to recruit more people of color for the school board itself as well. So that's something I'll be working on myself. Thanks.
More comments? Okay, well, that gives us all pause to reflect on what's been said and to try to come up with a way of meeting those challenges, especially starting this summer in terms of setting our goals, talking about future policy, working on ourselves to understand our own implicit biases, which just come as being born into this culture without really recognizing what that means to you personally. I know that when I was a teacher, I always felt like issues that were difficult like this, but were part of the community's history that you're in, and part of the culture, to present it to the students, a real opportunity to take stuff that was happening around them locally and really bring out, what do you feel about that? You know, what do you feel when somebody does this, this, or this? You know, how could we make that better for ourselves? So I think all of the statements that were made here tonight also provides both teachers and students a way of reflecting and working on these values so that all the people that are involved in this district can benefit by looking at this from other people's perspective and from their own. So anyway, I think there's a lot of opportunity in this. Okay, let's see, where are we at? I'm going to conclude this part. I think we got a lot of stuff that we can think about there. And the next thing on our agenda is Randy, your report.
Okay, I guess I'm so much a creature of habit, I keep producing this enrollment graph when we are precluded from adding or subtracting kids, but whatever, we've gained 1 kid since March 13th. And again, I remind the board that when this pandemic and this closure started, this executive order, that is the number that we're going to settle on for the annual ADM. And that is part of my planning for a strategy of how we get open in time. One other small thing I think I would point out, if you look at the balance sheet, the lunch fund is overdrawn. That is because we haven't been paid for all those gazillion summer meals that we've done yet. The bills have been submitted and they will get paid. And I think at that time I would remind the board too that we had the opportunity, and we've availed ourselves of it, to add the high school to that community eligibility food service program so that no student in the district is responsible for paying for their own lunch. And I think that in some small way goes to the equity thing, that frankly, it was marginal before, and there is some back funding out of the Student Success Act, not the Student Investment Account, to make that reimbursement to where it will work. And I think it's a great thing. And we had kids that went all the way through school and got to high school and then suddenly had to come up with lunch money, and they had never done that their whole career. So this is an important step. And I think it's our application, when it's accepted, will be a 4-year commitment. You can stop if you want, but the department would be obligated to keep us in that eligibility thing for the next 4 years. And frankly, I can't imagine a reason to stop. So I think that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Board Attorney's report. Jason.
Yeah, I just had to unmute myself there. I didn't get a chance when you were asking the board members to weigh in on Candy. I don't mean to embarrass her, but I wanted to just take a second as well. I have probably I do have more experience with Candy than any of you, since I've been here since before the beginning of the district. I've had an opportunity to watch her go from being a brand new superintendent to retirement. And I have, I just want to compliment you, Candy, on the incredible growth that I have seen. I'm certainly not an expert on what it takes to be a superintendent by any stretch of the imagination, but the development I've seen in you from that beginning to today, and I would echo some of the things that were said before about one of the things I admire the most about you is your single-minded determination to benefit the kids. And that has been reflected in everything that I've seen you do from 2004 until now. So I just want you to know that I've admired that. I've watched you handle with grace some pretty rough circumstances, both from within and from without the district. And I just want to know I'm going to miss you. I'll miss associating with you in your capacity as superintendent. But and I didn't get to say anything about Randy before when we said goodbye to him last month. So I'll miss you too, Randy.
Thanks.
But with that being said, I got a couple of things. First, we have completed the interim superintendent contract with Teresa, and I just need to get John your signature on that.
Okay.
So we can make an arrangement.
Okay.
Have you stop by my office and sign off on that, so we can get that completed whenever it's convenient for you. The second and probably more weighty matter is the issue of the investigation. I have received. You remember that the board directed me to engage a third-party investigator to review the allegations. I'll address those with regard to the board in open session and those with regard to the employee in the executive session. But the conclusion that I've come to after reading the report and the investigation by the third-party investigator is that specifically with regard to the board, that the board had no part in the alleged prohibition, had no part in alleging wrongdoing on the part of the complainant, that it made no report to TSPC as alleged in the initial complaint letter. And we also know that, and I know from being in all the board meetings, that the board has never discussed employment of that independent contractor with ESS in any capacity in executive or open sessions, nor was there any discussion with regard to him working as a substitute in the district until the complaint was received by Chair Nelson in November, which was the first time that those issues were raised. As a result, it is apparent to me with regard to the complaint against the board, and it is apparent also, I think, to the investigator, that there is no grounds for the complaint against the board. I'll make a recommendation with regard to the overall response to the complaint after we had a chance to talk about the employee in the executive session. But that's the finding that I think is clear with regard to the board and the allegations made against it, which I'm sure comes as no surprise to any of you, because you already all knew that you hadn't done anything to interfere with his ability to work or with his working for the school district. So I don't know if there are any questions about that. Like I said, I will address the other component of that in the executive session.
I just have one question, which is there a written report that would be made available to the public
There is
by the investigator?
There's a written report made available to me as the attorney for the district. It is, as a result, work product to me. And that's why I haven't just shared the entire thing with you, to protect the confidentiality of that process, I guess.
Any other questions of Jason? Okay. Thank you, Jason.
That's all I have.
Okay. So the next part of our agenda has to do with policies. There's 3 of them. And it's all about language. It's all about making changes in specific areas. And there's a board decision to make about that language in places in each of these policies, all 3 of these policies. So I'm, as chair, I'm going to deal with each policy by itself, have discussion over what's recommended as change and how we want to tweak that. And then we'll move to approve the end result for each policy, and then go to the next policy instead of bundling them all. Makes sense to me. Does it all make sense to you, you guys? Yeah, okay. All right, so the first policy is personnel records, GBL. And I read this, the changes that were made in here in red. And I just saw one thing that isn't actually part of what we have to think about, but it's a kind of in reading it, using some more commas in it. And so it would be number 2 on on page 27. So it's the first page of the personnel record. You see where all the numbers are there. So number 2, if you just read it, you have to like read it 6 times before you, what in the world is, it's like hard to understand. So I'll just read it like, and not stop the way it is here without any punctuation. Others designated in writing by the employee in writing may arrange to inspect the contents of the employee's personnel file in the same manner described above. And I went, what? So when I did this to it, then it began to make sense to me. It's not great, but it makes sense. Others designated in writing, comma, by the employee, comma, in writing may arrange to inspect the contents of the employee's personnel file in the same manner described above. So I would like to offer putting those commas in there to make it more readable. That's my suggestion on that. And then if you go all the way through to 10 on the next page, on page 28, underneath 10, it has one more part there, which is very similar to this one, but there is a subtle difference. So first of all, I thought, doesn't this duplicate number 2? But I don't think it does, because the first one is the employee's decision to have somebody inspect the personnel record. This is anybody kind of on the outside. So there is a difference. And it says, any others wishing access to personnel files must present to the district office a written statement from the employee granting such access or being officially designated to do so by the board. So I don't know if any of you other folks questioned that, but I did, and I'm okay with that. And then the other thing is what was it's where our job is, the bracketed part. So I'll read it. Release of personnel records to parties other than those authorized other than those listed above will be in line with the district's public records procedures or board policy KBA public records. I'll just give you my take on it. I think it's weaker to use the district's public records procedures because I think it's better to just go to and refer to the policy, the whole policy, rather than to kind of make a vague statement. So I would pick that. I would pick be in line with board policy KBA public records, covers the whole thing. And then the last part, whether or not to include this, the district will attempt to notify the employee of the request and that the district believes it's legally required to disclose certain records. I mean, believes it is legally required to disclose certain records. I feel that it would be good to include that. Makes sense to me to include that. If I was an employee, I'd want to know if something like that was happening in my file. So, your comments and where do you want to go with this?
I'll agree that in terms of the bracketed there at the end, that referencing our policy is kind of my preference there, as opposed to just saying the district public records procedure. On that final bracket, kind of rereading it again, the only thing, and this is just, I guess, an observation, it seems a little bit weak, meaning that the district will attempt to notify, not we are going to notify an employee. And I guess it kind of makes me think about, does this fall in line? And this is kind of a question, maybe Candy or even Jason, in terms of our agreements or bargaining with the unions. I mean, is this in line with language that we already have established with our staff? I guess I just want to be mindful that, if there is a notification clause or whatnot, that we kind of mirror that in the language here.
So, so you have what's in the collective bargaining agreement. This isn't, this won't weaken anything that's in the collective bargaining agreement. They will, move forward and protect whoever is currently employed. But you want to remember, personnel records are kept after people leave. And so I think you need some, because you may attempt, but you may not be able to actually, after something has been required in a legal process, you might end up not being able to get a hold of the people, yet you're bound to produce the information. So I think you need to keep the attempt in there, just given that that might happen. Jason, I'd let you weigh in on that as well.
I would agree with that, although I don't know specifically what the collective bargaining language might say, because I'm not involved in those negotiations. But you do need to, we need to protect ourselves from a strict requirement that we notify if there's something that interferes with that ability to do so. A reasonable basis for not being able to communicate that.
I would agree. I think I can think of a couple of references that, again, to the current employees, the onus is on them to keep their address up to snuff. But there are also references in the contract that we will contact them at their last known address. But I think, to both of your point, what is the remedy if we get tougher and say we must contact them before we do this, and we can't contact them? So I think, to your concern, Jose, I think it is consistent with the contract, to the attempt part.
Okay. No, thank you for that clarification. That makes sense.
Don.
Yeah, I just in following up at the end of that, it also seems a little weak that the district believes it is legally required to disclose certain records. It's like, it almost, and that sounds kind of weak, or more like the district is fully aware that it is legally required to disclose. I don't know, just the awareness and belief parts, it just, maybe I'm just quibbling.
Well, I'll let Jason also chime in on this, but it's been my experience that you can have two attorneys have a different opinion about what's legal and what's not. And so what you will always do as a district is you will go with your legal counsel, and it may end up in court someplace where somebody else says, no, that you didn't have that legal right, but you will go with your legal counsels. And so it'll be your belief, but you always know that that belief may be challenged. Is that correct, Jay?
That's correct. And I guess putting this in practical terms of what this might look like, we've talked about the employee or a former employee giving their consent to have their personnel information looked at. This is really more of a hostile review of documents. This is when I say hostile, I mean it's somebody making a demand to access personnel records without the consent of the person whose records they are. That usually comes in the form of a subpoena, which would be contested if the district felt it had an obligation to do so. But if it felt like if there's a basis for that, we would want to explain to the employee or the former employee that to the extent that we can, that we feel like there's a reason that we have to disclose it. That puts them on notice that they may need to take their own independent action to prevent that from happening.
Anybody else want to make a comment? So I would entertain a motion to approve this, but you're going to have to whoever makes that motion is going to have to define what the end result we've decided here is. So you might want to think about that, and then I'll entertain a motion.
Hey, John, one further question. Way back when you were putting the commas in.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's necessarily a choice, but wouldn't it read better if that second comma shouldn't it be after in writing? The employee in writing instead of the employee comma in writing again? I don't know.
The way I have it is others designated in writing, comma. Oh, I see. You're saying others designated, comma, in writing, comma?
No, the second comma. So designated in writing by the employee in writing, comma, instead of by the employee, comma, in writing.
Others designated in writing.
I think that makes a little more sense, Randy.
So say that again, Randy.
Was your second comma, John, that you were proposing after employee rather than after in writing?
I get you. Oh, okay. Let's see. Okay. So eliminate the comma, the first comma, and just have this. That's the way I originally had it. So yeah, I'm okay with that.
No, you can do what you want, but I think both commas are fine. It was just the second comma seemed to break it at the wrong spot. By the employee and then in writing again instead of by the employee in writing, comma.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. So others designated in writing by the employee in writing may arrange. That's what you're saying. Okay.
Which does seem to make more sense in terms of separating out the others designated in writing, and then the piece about by the employee in writing.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so there's that part. And what about the second part? So let's see if I can figure out here so what we've decided to do is say release of personnel records to parties other than those listed above, comma, will be in line with board policy KBA public records. The district will attempt to notify the employee of the request and that the district believes it is legally required to disclose certain records, period. Correct? So that's what we're agreeing on there. Okay, so does somebody want to make that motion? Okay, Jose, I'm glad you raised your hand.
All right. I move to adopt the revisions to policy JBL, specifically on item 2, we'll add the commas. So it'll read others designated in writing, comma, by the employee in writing, comma, may arrange to inspect the contents of the employee's personnel file in the same manner described above. And at the end of it will read release of personnel records to parties other than those listed above will be in line with board policy KBA public records, and the district will attempt to notify the employee of the request and that the district believes it is legally required to disclose certain records.
Is there a second to that motion? David is seconded. Any discussion?
Isn't it just redundant? Shouldn't it read others designated in writing by the employee may blah, blah, blah? I don't know. I guess we're nitpicking. It just seems redundant.
I was kind of thinking the same thing, because the second writing to me would seem to be a direction that the person that's been designated in writing by the employee to make the request also has to make the request in writing. Maybe I'm not.
Well, I think it's two different things. Others designated in writing. So that would be, in other words, the employee would designate others in writing.
Right.
Then in writing, may arrange to inspect. So then you have to write that it's okay to inspect the contents of the personnel file in the same manner described as above, So it's the employee, first of all, writing to invite somebody else that he's designating or she's designating to look, and then in writing, they make this proclamation to arrange to do all these other things. I mean, that's the way I'm reading it. But it's very confusing.
The way I was interpreting it, and I certainly could be wrong, is if you took that second in writing and put after the words may arrange, it seemed to make more sense to me that others designated in writing by the employee may arrange in writing to inspect the contents of the employee's file. And I don't know if I could be misinterpreting that, but that's what made sense to me, that not only do you have to have something in writing from the employee saying it's okay, but then the person making the request to see it, who's been authorized, needs to do it also in writing.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was saying. Kenny, do you know where this came from here?
Is that what you were saying, Soleil?
It is what I was saying, Jason. I like the language you suggested. Is exactly what I was thinking.
That does make it much clearer. So yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, good catch, Soleil.
So who would be the author of this change in writing? In other words, what do we know what they were intending? Is that?
Did you get this from OSBA? I'm assuming.
OSBA.
This is Oregon School Boards Association language.
So just knowing them, what do you think the intent is here, Candy?
Just what Jason got finished saying, because that's the folks that put it together would be very much in that vein. So,
Okay, so can I stop for a minute? OSBA wrote it, others designated by the employee in writing may arrange to inspect the content of the employee's personnel file in the same manner described above. So that was my error in that. So is that clear?
So say
The
that
first
again.
in writing was not what they put in there.
The second in writing should not be in there.
should not be in there.
Ah,
Thank you, Cindy.
yay.
Yep, I made a mistake.
Oh, God. Okay.
Others designated by the employee in writing may arrange to inspect the contents of the employee's personnel file in the same manner described above.
And so by the employee is out also, correct?
No,
Others designated in writing.
No, take
may
that out.
arrange- Take it
Others
out.
designated by the employee in writing. That's it.
So basically, others designated in writing by the employee may arrange to inspect the contents of the employee's personnel file in the same manner described above.
should take the first in writing out. The first where it says in writing, I think that's what you're saying, right, Cindy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Oh, others designated by the employee
Yeah.
may
Right.
arrange. Ah.
Gotta get this
The
uncovered
first,
yet.
Oh my God. Phew.
So there was a strike.
Holy moly. No. It was like my brain was twisting. when I read it.
Truly takes a
Takes
village.
me back to the 7th grade diagramming of sentences.
Holy moly. Okay. Others designated by the employee may arrange to inspect the, okay, that one. All right, so Jose, I hate to say this, but you want to reread it the way we're going to vote on it one more time so everybody's clear.
All right. So let's see. I think we said it. Is it the first in writing or the second, to clarify?
It's the first, it should have been crossed
First.
out.
Okay. All right. Let's do this then. So I move to update or revise policy JBL with the following changes. On item 2, it shall read, others designated by the employee in writing may arrange to inspect the contents of the employee's personnel file in the same manner described above. The final paragraph will read, release of personnel records to parties other than those listed above will be in line with board policy KBA public records. The district will attempt to notify the employee of the request and that the district believes it is legally required to disclose certain records.
So we have a second. Although, any more discussion? All those in favor of approving this policy change, say aye, raise your hand. I think that's unanimous. Policy is changed to reflect that. Okay. Okay, it's only number 2 now. Sexual harassment, which is 3 pages long. Okay. So in this one, you have the board, the district is committed to elimination of sexual harassment in district schools, and it goes on as you can read. But the part that we have to decide is, do we want to include the prohibition of off-duty conduct, which is incompatible with a staff member's district job responsibilities? So the change there really in language that used to be there is basically clarifying that we're talking about a staff member, because it used to be the prohibition also includes off-duty contact, which is incompatible with the district job's responsibility. So they're just making it doubly clear it's a staff member's district job responsibilities. I think that's what that's getting at.
I would say that we should include that prohibition, absolutely.
Yeah, and include those staff member clarification words, correct? Don, yeah. Okay. The second part that we have to look at is all new language. And we have some choices in that new language, I guess. I guess to add, to whether or not to add the description. And the full description is, as you can read. So I'll just let you read all of that.
On that one, that you don't have the discretion not to, you have to have a list of examples of harassing behaviors covered by the policy. But those in the bracket are OSBA's recommendations, so you could list different ones.
Ah, okay.
Can I make a comment, John?
Yeah, sure.
Where it says talking about one's sexuality, I feel like that is a bit infringing upon conversations in general about sexuality. I think it's not quite specific enough to inappropriateness. Like in this day and age, there's so much conversation around gender identity and these kinds of things and sexuality. So I question whether or not that part should be in that statement or in that list. Curious what other board members think.
I guess, you could have a situation where a kid asks a teacher, their preference. So would that be considered discussing their sexuality? It's not like they brought it up, but it could be a situation where, the kids bring it up and they ask and they want to know because inquiring minds. So I kind of with Soleil on this one. It's kind of a gray area.
I think you're running the risk, and I agree with you, Soleil. You're running the risk of somebody saying, a student saying to another student that they gender identify differently than somebody else could be certainly interpreted as talking about one's sexuality, which could create a problem. Either way, I think that it's risky to have that language in there. Because you already have sexual activity or performance later, which is the other interpretation that I would have for talking about one's sexuality, is whether they're active and that's already covered as with those additional examples below.
So how do others feel about taking that out, not including that, or talking about one's sexuality in front of others? Just take it out of the mix there.
Yeah, I think I would agree that that language being left in there. I'm just thinking you guys had good examples too. I'm just thinking of like a health class and trying to talk about certain topics, and it just seems like it goes against, or not against, but it doesn't fall in line with what this policy is really after. So I think removing it makes sense. So thanks for bringing it up, Soleil.
Yeah, that's a good catch. Okay. So then we have the word immediately. And so I read this a couple of times, and at first I was questioning it, but after reading it several times, I think as long as you're going to, you're asking staff members who are aware of certain behaviors happening that violate the policy, that if you're going to report it, you should report it right away, because there's a lot of protection language in here that by reporting it, you're not going to be punished in any way.
It also protects the district because we've established an expectation
Yeah,
of staff not to hold things back from being divulged.
yeah,
So they can't say, well, they can't, I don't want to use the word hide behind, but they can't use that as an excuse. Well, it wasn't clear that I needed to report it immediately. No, you need to report it immediately. And if they don't do that, then they're not following the policy.
yeah.
I agree. It emphasizes the urgency of reporting these types of critical issues. I think it should be in there.
Yeah. And you don't
I
want,
agree too.
as a
And
district,
then
you don't want, sorry,
go ahead, Jason.
I just said, as a district, we don't want somebody who may be the victim of abuse to have a reason to say we didn't follow through with what we should have followed through with.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense to, like Soleil said, gives to just kind of the nature of it, the importance of it. And I think that, because I was thinking, would this preclude someone if, for whatever reason they didn't feel safe to do it immediately for whatever reason, but there is no, like, from what I can tell, no timeline or expiration. So immediately is, whenever, if something were to happen, that person is ready to come forward. It doesn't put an expiration date on it, but I think it speaks to the importance of it, that we as a district want to hear it as soon as possible.
Any other comments? Okay, so then there's one other section on the next page.
Just a clarification on, it's a choice. You have to post in at least grades 6 through 12. That's the minimum under the law. But you have the choice of posting in all schools, so that would include our elementary schools. So that's the choice there.
Okay, so in the posting of this sign, like from the old language, I can see that was the old policy to post it. So like, where do those get posted? Is there one, right now, is there one in every school? Is that the way it is now? Or?
That's
How is
the
it now?
way the policy reads. So, and I believe, well, maybe if Teresa's still on, she can explain where she posts those sorts of things.
Yeah, so we have, I have like a parent resource bulletin board in the hallway just near the entryway. And so information like our volunteer policy, that kind of thing, it's posted right there. Information about homeless, for students and families that are homeless, that's posted there. So that would be an appropriate place. But really, the student handbook, of course, is which gets handed out to every student's family, would be the best place.
Yeah, it's also there, right? Correct. Yeah. So at present, I guess my question is, at present, is it posted at all schools or not? Candy? Can't hear you. Yeah, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I do not believe it is posted in all schools right now.
Just grade 6 through 12.
I believe it's posted in the upper grade.
I personally would like to see it in all schools. If it could be posted in elementary schools in an appropriate location, where parents will see it, I think it's something, unfortunately, that touches all age groups.
I agree with
Post it higher on the bulletin board.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I'm only kind of kidding on that. If you put it higher on the board, you're less likely to traumatize the kindergartners, but still get the information out.
It could be their first reading lesson. Is that what you're saying? Okay. All right. So I will try to capture what we've decided on here. So we will include in this policy, JBN, JBA, this language. At the end of the first paragraph, it would include all of what's there. The prohibition also includes off-duty contact, which is incompatible with a staff member's district job responsibilities. In the section 3, examples of sexual harassment may include, but not be limited to, physical touching or graffiti of a sexual nature, displaying or distributing of sexually explicit drawings, pictures and written materials, sexual gestures or obscene jokes, touching oneself sexually, or spreading rumors about or rating other students or others as to appearance, sexual activity, or performance. And that we include the words immediately in those places that are indicated on our staff report. And that's 2 places extra. So I would entertain a motion to approve those changes.
Dawn,
Yeah.
you missed that last section we just talked about too. About posting in all schools.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Oh, and then also almost at the very end, that the district's policy shall be posted on a sign in all schools. There. So, who would like to make a motion?
I will make a motion to accept all the changes as read.
A second?
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the sexual harassment policy JBN, JBA as amended. All those in favor say aye. And I think that's everybody. So the motion passes. Okay. Last one is a entirely new policy. And do you want to explain where this came from, Candy, the history of why we're adding this, where that comes from?
There's a very much an emphasis on concern across our state, but of course across the nation, in terms of the increasing number of student suicides that are happening. And so here in Oregon, law has been passed, and this is the Oregon administrative rule that has that Oregon School Boards Association has now fashioned this policy template. But we are required to have board policy, and we do have a plan that's Jerry Snodgrass in particular has been working on the district student suicide prevention plan. But it's we're really at a crisis level in this country in terms of the new number of students and even at a very young age that are attempting suicide. So that being said, it's an important piece of work that needs to happen in public schools for sure.
So on the part that we're trying to make a decision about, are there choices in that? What is it getting at? I didn't really...
The only choice is whether you're going to include the bracketed language. And as I've stated before, we're doing the comprehensive plan. We will be consulting, but if you would like for whoever is working on this into the future to know that the district may consult and want to put that language in, that's it's fine. Either way, we will do the work.
Yeah, it just gives future people that are looking at this for the first place, all the different places that they can consult. So that seems helpful.
And it's permissive language, it's not mandatory.
Yeah. I feel okay with adding that. Anybody have other feelings?
I think it makes sense.
Including that.
I think the bracketed text makes sense.
Yeah, me too. Does everybody agree? Thumbs up? Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to that effect. Jose?
I move to adopt policy JHH along with the bracketed text as reviewed.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
I second it. It's been moved and seconded to approve the policy JHH as amended. All those in favor say aye by raising your hand. Looks like that's unanimous. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. So motion passes. I get lost sometimes in where I'm at. So it's like I was reading the paper and looking at the screen. Ah! Okay. Where are we? Okay, we've done all of that stuff. There's 2 action items to adopt some resolutions. Randy, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. The first action item, I guess on an annual basis, is probably the most important resolution that the school board adopt. This is the closing the circle on the local budget law. We've complied with all of the local budget law, including the budget hearing. And this resolution keeps us from going out of business at midnight on June 30th. So it does 3 things, actually. It adopts the budget in total as presented and approved by the budget committee. It appropriates the expenditures into statutory categories. And it also will serve as notice to the county assessor to assess the tax. So yeah, it's an important resolution, certainly.
Somebody like to make that motion?
I would make a motion to adopt the budget as presented.
Okay, second. Jose? So it's been moved in.
Or Don, if you could amend your motion to it, if you would move to adopt the resolution, that would include all of the things that need to be done. The budget and the appropriations and the levy.
I would like to make a motion to adopt the budget, make the appropriations, impose the tax, and categorize the tax.
All right, is there a second to that motion? Okay, Jose seconds that motion. It's been, any discussion, any further discussion?
I thought we had to move to pass the resolution number. Is that not right, Randy? Resolution 2021-01.
Okay, let me rescind all other previous
It
motions.
includes all the stuff.
Okay, so I'm going to rescind all previous motions, and I would like to make a motion to approve resolution number 20-21-01 to adopt the budget, make the appropriations, impose the tax, and categorize the tax as presented.
Okay.
How did I do, Andy?
Whoa, I'm impressed. Thank you so much for that, Don. That's genius work. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. So this motion, which we all just heard, has been it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye by raising your hand. Looks unanimous. The motion passes. Okay, want to say anything, Mandy, about action, the next
Just
action?
quickly, this is sort of a milestone. I think in my tenure, I have brought a similar motion forward to the board at that time to close the District 9 bond fund. And now it's time to close the District 12 bond fund. The board is actually statutorily the only one that can create a fund or abolish a fund. So this is within your purview only. I was explaining to Candy the other day, it's much simpler now that they have registered bonds, so we don't have to wait for somebody to find a bond interest coupon that they lost and it never got presented. So now all of the bonds and all of the interests have been paid. And it's my recommendation that resolution 19-2008 will close the bond fund.
I'll entertain a motion. Somebody make that motion. Okay, Dave, you want to try it?
I move that we pass resolution 19-20-08.
I'll second that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Slay. You got it.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to pass ordinance 19-20-08, closing a fund. All those in favor, vote by raising your hand. Okay, looks unanimous. The motion passes.
And what a great thing to go out on, Candy and Randy. It's like, what about that, huh?
All right, so at this time, I will close this regular school board meeting in order to go into executive session to consider.
John, you don't want to close the meeting. You just want to adjourn to executive session.
Oh, okay. I was going to close it and reopen it, but okay. Adjourn. I'd like to adjourn to executive session. Okay.
Pursuant to that statute.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wait a minute.